transformative change that is truly unprecedented, that will provide unprecedented opportunities, and we recognize the risks to come. Given the capabilities of both institutions, the passion for the industry, and networks of collaboration, these opportunities for research and innovation are within reach. I look ahead into a horizon where Mintek continues to lead and partner with key stakeholders to ensure that the country's members drive growth and development, as well as enhance social progress and prosperity for the nation. Thank you very much.
The reason I get hired to do AC work is because I'm very good at keeping people on time. And I promise you it's an important thing because you can't have people hanging around forever and every time. So I'm very pleased to let you know, with all the bullying I did with all the speakers, we're actually 30 minutes early, which means you get more time in terms of your team. How's that? Thank you. The first thing
from a defense point of view. As I've mentioned, electric vehicles are one of the key drivers at the moment for permanent magnet demand and also requiring rare earths. We've seen EV sales slow a year or two ago, but growth is picking up again, and plug-in hybrids, which is taking a bit of the slack from EV demand, is taken up by plug-in hybrids. And plug-in hybrids, even though they use less battery minerals, in terms of rare earth elements, they still use the same amount of permanent motors in the electric motors that you require for plug-in hybrids. So we don't mind as an industry whether EV sales are going through the roof or the plug-in hybrid sales are going, we still require the same amount of permanent magnets in terms of kilograms per vehicle. And then of course you've got your wind turbines. Wind turbines are forecast to continually roll out globally. There's hundreds and hundreds of gigawatts of wind turbine power being developed between now and 2040, and each wind turbine, 3 megawatt wind turbine, takes between 1 and 2 tons of permanent magnets per turbine. So you can see that the forecast growth you see there, which is well entrenched by the whole planet trying to achieve net zero, and that's not going away. So your mega trend is not going away. You might have dips in that mega trend, but it's been legislated and it's going to continue to drive demand for permanent magnets and rare earth elements for the foreseeable future. We also have a new frontier opening up, 2 new frontiers in fact opening up for permanent magnet motors, and these are robotics and eVTOLs, which I'll speak about briefly in a couple of minutes. But at the moment, you saw Elon Musk launch his robots a few weeks ago on X, but basically between now and 2040, we see 1 billion robots being utilized around the world, 1 billion robots. And the humanoid robots that you see a photograph of there, those humanoid robots need 5 to 15 kilograms of permanent magnet motors, permanent magnets in their motors. So the humanoid robots are, to get full humanoid functionality, being able to move your head and hands and that, they're going from 38 motors to 78 motors, so they're doubling, and that's leading to increased permanent magnets and increased rare earths. And these effectively will be able to pour cocktails for you, tie your shoelaces, pick grapes and whatever, as well as going into industry, as you can see. And then we've already seen adoption of robots in the West, and this is going to continue to grow. And this is a new frontier of demand in the next decade, which we believe will outstrip the demand you see from electric vehicles. And then you're going to have eVTOLs, which is electrical vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, which basically air taxis, drones, and so forth. And I'll speak about that later. My son was in LA about 3 months ago, and he showed me robots in action in LA. This is delivering pizzas to somebody in LA, and that means the end of your 60/60 scooter driver and your Uber Eats and so forth. And here's a quick video to show this. There's your robot about to cross the street in LA. He's busy delivering a pizza. There's my son standing in front of it. It senses he's in front, stops, sees there are no cars, and carries across the road on its way to deliver that pizza. And this is just starting at the moment, and it's on a huge trajectory over the next decade. We now see eVTOLs, and so this started with drones, recreational drones. Now we're now seeing drone deliveries taking place by Amazon already, also in LA and other cities in the US, and obviously this will roll out to other Western cities quite quickly. And then we are essentially going to be seeing what's known as air taxis starting to operate next year already in America. And those look like Star Wars, if you remember Star Wars from 30 years ago. We all thought that was just pie in the sky, but it's actually a reality today. These vehicles, there'll be 4 commercial licenses operating in the US next year to start trialing these eVTOLs, which are 2 in New York, JFK, 1 in LAX, and 1 in Chicago's airport. And these eVTOLs will be basically, so in LA, to go from the airport to San Diego normally takes you an hour and a half in traffic. An eVTOL is going to take 8 minutes, and it's cost the same price as an Uber Black. So you can see why there's going to be a tremendous demand for this type of transport, and it's something that's going to grow over the next decade. And as I said, we all thought this was Star Wars, but it's a reality, with you being able to take your first commercial flight starting next year in the US. Currently, China dominates the rare earth market. They control about 60 to 70% of primary production of rare earths, and they control 90+% of downstream beneficiation. And the whole world wants to wean itself off one dominant supplier. It's not good business to have one dominant supplier for anything that you're involved in. And as COVID, we saw the dependence on one supply chain led to critical shortages and all sorts of things around the world. And the world woke up to the fact that you can't rely on one supplier for something as critical as your rare earth elements and permanent magnets. So the whole world's trying to create independent supply chain outside of China. And as I said, as you can see from that slide, China dominates. US is the next biggest producer, and then you've got Myanmar just produces mixed rare earth concentrate similar to a PGM concentrate, which the audience can relate to. As you know, a PGM concentrate, you've got all those other elements, platinum, palladium, rhodium, and so forth. That's your first stage of PGM, of mining, and then that has to be smelted to separate those various elements. In the rare earth space, you produce a mixed rare earth concentrate, which they do in Myanmar, but it's all shipped to China for separation, refining, and then permanent magnet manufacturing. And as I said, the whole world realizes that we need other sources of these, not only these critical minerals, but also the permanent magnets. And this has currently been rolled out in the West, and there's lots of support from the US government, the EU, and so forth. The Australian government are behind trying to create independent supply chain outside of China as well. And it's a trend that's not going away, whether it's a Democratic government in the US or a Republican government. They're bipartisan on this one issue, which is creating an independent supply chain. Africa has got the potential to be a significant producer of rare earths, circa 10% of world demand. But projects in Africa, well, all rare earth projects generally have a very, very long lead time. The average cradle to grave for a mining project, which is discovery to production, is 15 to 25 years. And rare earth projects are even more difficult. It's not like that's for a gold project or a copper project, which are relatively simple. But rare earth projects have got difficult mineralogy. They've got very, very expensive capex. They've got generally high opex, and and basically they're also a lot of rare earth projects are associated with the radionuclides, that being uranium and thorium, and this is an issue for lots of funders around the world. So as I said, rare earth projects are difficult to bring on stream for all these various reasons. And what we have in the Petroleum project, which I'll speak about that Rainbow are involved in, is very different to your typical rare earth project, because we're not beset with those problems of high thorium or high uranium. So as I say, Rainbow is pioneering the first commercial recovery of rare earth elements from phosphogypsum. Now, the phosphogypsum is the result of hard rock phosphate mining that we have at Petroleum at the moment. It's been mined by Phosphor for 60 years. They produce a hard rock, they mine a hard rock deposit there. They concentrate it through a flotation process into a phosphate slurry, and that phosphate slurry for 60 odd years was pumped next door to a phosphoric acid plant. The last major owner of that phosphoric acid plant was Sasol, who we all know. That phosphate slurry, as I said, was the feed for the phosphoric acid plant, where they added two key ingredients, sulfuric acid and heat, to create phosphoric acid. And the rare earths that were in the phosphate slurry were further upgraded in the phos acid sludge in the phosphoric acid plant, and then that phosphoric acid production created a gypsum waste residue, and the rare earths deported with the gypsum in a concentrated form into the gypsum stacks. And now we have an economic sort of grade of rare earths sitting in the gypsum stacks at Petroleum. And we've developed an innovative flow sheet in conjunction with Mintek to be able to commercially extract economically the rare earths out of the phosphogypsum. And we realized at Rainbow that once we got the rare earths into solution, why did we stop at a mixed rare earth carbonate, which is one stage of beneficiation downstream? We said we're going to go all the way further downstream to produce separated rare earth oxides. And that's the journey that Rainbow have been embarked on with our project at Petroleum. There you can see the asset in Petroleum. It's a mothballed asset at the moment. You've got the old open pit that was mined for many years just to the east. Here's just an old Phoscor and PMC, which is the Petroleum mining company, the old copper mines tailings project. Over here you've got the old Sasol phosphoric acid plant that's been mothballed, hasn't been operating for 10 years now. And over there you can see that slight sort of color there, that's yellow. That's the old sulfur stockpile, because they had a sulfuric acid plant here which fed the phosphoric acid plant with the slurry that was pumped in, the phosphate slurry, to create phosphoric acid, which is your key ingredient into fertilizer. So this fed the Sasol's fertilizer business, or one of the feeders of Sasol's fertilizer business. And they created these two gypsum stacks. The gypsum stacks are unlined because 60 odd years ago there were no environmental regulations that said you had to line these stacks. So these stacks are unlined and they're actually environmentally unfriendly at the moment. Rainbow's project is going to clean this all up, and it's very environmentally friendly, which is key, and I'll talk about that a bit later. But what's important is that it's a brownfield site. It's already fenced. We've got overhead power line here. We've got a high voltage switch yard sitting over there. Next door, you've got PMC, which is the old Rio Tinto copper mine. They've got a sulfuric acid plant, and they've got about 10,000 tons of sulfuric acid a month to get rid of. Rainbow is going to require about 4,000 tons a month. So we've got very, very, very cheap source of sulfuric acid, which is a waste stream from PMC, which is also turns us into also very strong ESG credentials as we're using waste in a constructive way. And as I said, I'll talk more about what we're doing with the actual site itself. So here's the history of the project in Phalaborwa. As I said, it was discovered in 1951, and Phoscor started mining this hard rock, and for many, many years it fed the phosphoric acid plant that was recently sold by Sasol after arbitration proceeding with the government that forced them to sell this acid to a company called Bossard Phosphates. The phosphoric acid plant never ever really restarted, and I got involved in late 2020 to secure this acid for Rainbow, because I realized that the rare earths in the phosphogypsum were very high grade. So the rare earths in this phosphogypsum stack sit at 0.44% total rare earth oxides, which sounds low, but we've got no mining costs here. If you look at a ionic clay deposit, which they mine in China, they mine in Myanmar, and they're trying to develop around the world, those ionic clay deposits are 0.04 to 0.08% TREO. So we by the order of 6 to 10 times higher grade than the ionic clay deposit. And the reason why our footprint is against ionic clay deposits is ionic clay deposits have very, very low mining cost, and they leach the rare earths directly with sulfuric acid, similar to what we do here at Phalaborwa. So when we compare ourselves to ionic clay deposit, it's a far, far more robust project, because grade is everything in this type of project. As I said, Mintek have been involved in this project for a very, very long time. They started historical test work on the phosphogypsum in the 1980s. A pilot plant was built by Sasol, and they actually produced 3 tons of a mixed rare earth carbonate, cerium, what they call cerium depleted, one of the rare earth elements, that make up an average of about 40% of the rare earth elements in any rare earth deposit. 40 to 50% is always cerium. So it's a low value product, and you want to get rid of it. So they were very successful in doing a lot of test work and a lot of work, but it could not be done economically. Partly because at that stage no one was chasing neodymium and praseodymium or dysprosium and terbium, which are four very, very high value rare earth elements. Rainbow got hold of the project late in December 2020, and in 21 we started working on trying to initially drill the stacks to prove up the resource, and then started doing test work with ANSTO in Australia. And there our leach work showed that with sulfuric acid, we leached the rare earths into solution. We got 75% of the rare earths in solution, very, very high recovery. We also, once again, confirmed what's brilliant about Phalaborwa. It's got very, very low uranium and thorium in the stack. So basically, the uranium and thorium levels in the gypsum stacks at Phalaborwa are about the same levels of radioactivity you have in your microwave oven at home. So absolutely no risk to anybody. And in terms of, we're not going to ship any product with uranium or thorium in, but even if we wanted to ship it, this would be easy to ship internationally. It does not suffer from what a lot of rare earth projects suffer from, is very high levels of uranium and thorium. As I said, once we established that the rare earths could leach into solution very effectively with sulfuric acid, we started looking at going further downstream, not just producing mixed rare earth carbonate, but producing separated rare earth oxides. And this is where we started engaging with Mintek again, and using Mintek's world-class facilities. So we've been able to develop an economic flow sheet, as I say, and we started working with Mintek in 2022, and we're still working with Mintek, and I'll talk about that briefly. But apart from doing initial test work, we then went and built a pilot plant with Mintek, and this is a large-scale pilot plant at Mintek. Now, normal mineral processing pilot plants run at about 3 to 5 kilograms an hour of feed. At Mintek, we are basically, 2 to 5 kilograms an hour of feed. At Mintek, we were 20 kilograms an hour of feed. So it's sort of 6 to 10 times the size of a normal pilot plant. And you can see from the size of the equipment and next to the those guys who are looking at the pilot plant, the size of the tanks and so forth, this is a large-scale pilot plant. We ran it for a lengthy period, and eventually we ran an integrated full circuit for almost a month, 24/7, taking very, very accurate measurements to make sure that on independent due diligence, our process would be verified and we would have no problem with that. Once again, more photographs of the pilot plant at Mintek. As you can see, large scale, beautiful pilot plant. Very proud of this pilot plant, and everybody who's been to see this pilot plant has been very, very impressed with what was built here at Mintek. So this is the PEA, the preliminary economic assessment we did on Rainbow in October 2022. Remember, we only started working on the project in January 21, and within 20 months we produced a PEA with an economic flow sheet. But with all the work we've done at Mintek over the last year or so, we've been able to optimize the PEA flow sheet to come out with a better flow sheet which will allow us to have even lower CapEx and hopefully, and it should flow into lower OpEx, which is key in the rare earth space. So all these boxes here, we're able to eliminate with the work we did at Mintek from our flow sheet. So come out with a far more simplified flow sheet, and this is before we go into the final stage downstream, which is separated rare earth oxides. If we stopped at this flow sheet as we have it here, we'd produce a mixed rare earth carbonate, which Rainbow could sell into the international market. As I said, some projects stop a step earlier at a mixed rare earth concentrate, but this takes us to a mixed rare earth carbonate, and now we can go into the final stage of separation, all the way into separated rare earth oxides. I might add that there's only one company in the world outside of China that goes all the way through to separated oxides right now, and that's Lynas in Australia, and Mountain Pass in America are just starting to get there, but they haven't quite got there yet. So the fact that Rainbow are very close to that, it will make us one of the few producers outside of China that go all the way through to separated rare earth oxides, and especially with the economies or the OPEX and the EBITDA margin that Rainbow will achieve. We, as I said, after the work at Mintek and in conjunction with the work at Mintek, we've been doing work in Florida and America, working with US technology to do the final stage separation. And now we're using what's known as continuous ion exchange and continuous ion chromatography. Continuous ion exchange is used throughout the world in uranium plants and is used in other plants, and the Rainbow team have lots of experience with continuous ion exchange. So this is a technology that we are very familiar with. And then the last step is continuous ion chromatography, and that is where we using the same continuous ion exchange system that we use initially to remove rare earth impurities, then go into another system, but this is the ion chromatography, where you just have a different resin. And you load the pregnant leach solution onto these columns. There's 30 columns on a circular rotating valve, and we force an element down these columns, and the rare earth starts separating. Similar to what you did at school with litmus paper in solution. You dip litmus paper into a solution, you pulled it out, you got the colors of the rainbow. You could do that 100 times, you got the same colors of the rainbow every single time. That's ion chromatography. As you push solution through these rotating columns, the rare earths separate at the same stage on the resin column. And then we scavenge the rare earths off the columns as they separate in their individual elements, and then we do it more and more times to get the purity level up to where we want to get to, which is 99+% purity. We've achieved 96% purity, but we are now bringing this pilot plant from America once again back to South Africa into Mintek, where we're going to optimize our separation from the 96% purity to the 99+% purity using the experience that we have at Mintek, and Rainbow is also a very, very experienced and dedicated team. So we see ourselves having lots of support by Mintek, and we will have this pilot plant running in sort of January, February. This back-end pilot plant will be running just to prove that final stage separation. We believe this is one of the most resilient rare earth projects in the world. There you can see we ran a trial reclaim on the phosphogypsum in February this year very successfully. So we proved we could reclaim it hydraulically. The resource is 35 million tons, which is going to give us 16 years. So it's a very good project. What's very important is the neodymium and praseodymium. The two key elements that are going to permanent magnets make up almost 30% of our basket, which is one of the highest baskets for neodymium and praseodymium of any rare earth project in the world. We're going to produce circa 1,850 to 2,000 tons of these 4 rare earth elements. That makes us a significant producer. It makes us about a third of the size of Mountain Pass. Not Mountain Pass, Linus at the moment in Australia. And our OPEX per kilogram of separated rare earth oxides we believe, is the lowest of any project in the West. And we believe even below the cost of the Chinese. So the fact that we could achieve such a low OPEX makes this project very resilient. At the moment, no rare earth projects in the world are making money at current rare earth pricing. If you look at Linus, they're losing money. You're looking at Mountain Pass, they're losing money. Even Chinese producers have said that they were losing money. This was about 2 months ago when rare earth prices for neodymium and praseodymium were sitting at about $47, $48 a kg for neodymium and praseodymium. Even at that low price, Rainbow would have been profitable if we'd been in production. Rare earth prices have since recovered slightly. They're sitting at about $60 a kg for neodymium and praseodymium. As I say, those two key permanent magnet elements. But in 2022, they were sitting at $180 a kg. So the market's way off from where it was in 2022. But all the forecasts are for rising rare earth prices. Very important, we're rehabilitating the site at Pelaboa. We are going to be reclaiming this phosphogypsum. We're going to be using the acid water that's associated with the stacks from the phosphoric acid production, neutralizing that water and using it in the closed circuit in our process plant. The clean gypsum will then be deposited on the line stack site to IFC standards and the equator principles, and we're going to be selling the clean gypsum into the South African gypsum market. The audience might not be aware, but in the next 2 to 3 years, all the sources of natural gypsum in South Africa are mined out, and therefore this acid at Pelaboa becomes a very, very good source of gypsum for the South African gypsum market for the next 30 odd years. So we're going to be selling gypsum into the SA market. As I said, we are going to be using sulfuric acid from next door, from PMC. We're going to be getting silica from Phoscor. It's also a byproduct. It's a waste product, in fact. Now they're very happy that we're going to be using silica in our process, and we're going to be selling this clean gypsum into the SA market and surrounding territories who need it for cement and so forth where we can. So we will be a circular economy, and over the life of those phosphogypsum stacks, eventually they will be completely level with the ground, complete rehabilitation of that site in Pelaboa, which not many projects can claim. We're obviously it's a brownfield site. We're going to be re-employing hopefully a lot of the employees that lost their jobs when Sasol was forced to close that phosphoric acid plant, and we'll be obviously training new skills and doing what we can for the environment. So we believe we're going to add a lot of social value to the town of Pelaboa and to the environment generally. What this has enabled Rainbow is to also address a larger market globally. We've did a deal with Mosaic about 18 months ago. They're a global fertilizer producer listed in New York, and they have a project in Uberaba in Brazil, which is producing phosphogypsum, very similar to what we see happening at Pelaboa. It's hard rock carbonatite, phosphate slurry, phosphoric acid plant, adding sulfuric acid, adding heat, and producing a gypsum waste residue with very, very high levels of rare earths for that type of acid in the gypsum waste residue. And we've done deal with Uberaba, well, with Mosaic and Uberaba on the 50-50 JV to develop that project jointly with them. We've approached recently by a similar project in Canada. We've been approached by a company in India to look at their phosphogypsum stacks in India. We've been approached by the Saudis in Saudi Arabia to be their technology partner, and we have a MOU signed with OCP in Morocco. The Saudi, Indian, and Moroccan opportunities are a different kind of opportunity because it's sedimentary sources of phosphogypsum, which is much, much lower grade. But we think with enough R&D, and it might be a 5 or 10 year R&D project, but gives Rainbow a long pipeline of sources of rare earth elements, we'll be able to work out how to upgrade these assets to a level where it makes it economically feasible to extract the rare earths out of those rare earth assets in those countries. So it puts Rainbow in a unique position. It's a technology that's been developed in South Africa with Mintek, with Rainbow's resources. It's opening up this global footprint for Rainbow, and we're very excited about this. We also have some strategic partners. We have the US government who's has been able to identify this asset in South Africa as a key asset for independent source of rare earths outside of China. We secured $50 million of funding for construction finance when it comes to of equity funding. We have TechMet, which is a critical minerals fund funded by the DFC in the US and 12% of Rainbow. And recently we did a royalty deal with Ecora. We raised $10 million to complete our DFS and our pilot work. And what's important is both of these companies did independent due diligence on Rainbow's flow sheet, which, as I said, we've developed jointly with Mintek, and we've got full marks, which is why we were able to raise the money. Not only the DFC's money, but TechMet's 12% and Ecora's $10 million. So we've got very strong stakeholders and a very, very strong tick of DD that says that they believe that Rainbow are going to be very successful going forward. I'd like to thank you for your time and listening to the Rainbow story. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernard, for that wonderful overview. I think this is an example of what we've been talking about, partnership, collaboration, working with industry to address industry-specific challenges. The next speaker really doesn't need any introduction. We will be hearing from Bernard talking about South Africa's leadership role in critical minerals embodied in manganese. How do we also take the reins of leadership in battery-grade manganese? I'm looking forward to this presentation. We all know battery-grade precursor materials require exceptional purity. I'd like to hear how they are doing it at MMMC, but like I've done with Bernard, with the previous speaker, with Bernard and Barnard. I need to be specific. Mr. Sonnepoel has over 40 years of experience in the South African mining industry, of which over 25 years have been in senior executive management roles. He qualified as a mining engineer and completed a BCom honors in financial management. He was the chief executive officer of Harmony for 12 years before he founded To The Point Growth Specialist, TTP, with Clinton Hasley in 2008. Bernard served for 11 years on the board of Sanlam and for 15 years on the board of African Rainbow Minerals. He's chairman of Manganese Metals Company and past president of AHI, and its inaugural chairman of the board when it became the SBI, Small Business Institute. Through To The Point Growth Specialist, he co-owns Resources for Africa investment conferences, which holds industry conferences like Coal and Energy Transition Day, PGM's Industry Day, Hydrogen Economy Discussion, Junior Indaba, Joburg Indaba, and the London Indaba. He chairs all these conferences. Bernard currently serves on the board of Implats, Zimplats, and African Exploration Mining and Finance Corporation. The stage is yours, Bernard.
Good morning. I'm just starting my own timer so that I can assist the Master of Ceremonies with our timekeeping here. Acting Minister, it is time for the youth to lead. The old people must stay where they are, let the young people take over. On a very serious note, I've never sold anything for $120 million, so I'm not a credible presenter like George. I was indeed at Harmony when we commercialized the gold solvent extraction technology patented and developed by Mintek, and there's no doubt about my deep respect for this institution. At MMC, we recently celebrated 50 years of being the world's premium pure manganese producer. 50 years. I wish we could go back to 1974 and contemplate what ecosystem existed in order to facilitate the creation of MMC. I've only been involved since 2010, so my contribution is but the last chapter of MMC. I think we're going to try and give you a practical example of value creation through beneficiation. I'm going to make 3 key points. The one, as our MC indicated, is the purity requirements for battery-grade manganese. Lots of people speak about it. Nobody in the world outside China and MMC is achieving that. I'm going to talk about the capital allocation which will be required to make battery-grade manganese so abundantly available that the OEM producers can actually build their future technologies on the assumption and the guarantee that it will be available. And thirdly, I'm going to dwell a little bit on the strategic advantage for South Africa. We can all define critical minerals as we see fit. I disclose what the International Renewable Energy Agency defines. South Africa is relevant in 3 of those: platinum and iridium, which I happen to have fantastic exposure through my board position at Implats and Zimplats, and then manganese, where if the number is very small, we mine 35, call it 36% of the world's manganese, significantly bigger than Gabon at 23%. I'm not here to define critical minerals. I'm just speaking to the one that fits into the definition that I represent, which is manganese. So we are actually an incumbent supplier of battery-grade manganese. We are the world's largest producer of high-purity manganese metal and the only non-Chinese producer. We do some 28,000 tons of high-purity electromanganese, selenium-free, which is what is unique about our process. We've done that since 1974. We were built in a weird place, not that Nelspruit is a weird place, but it's geographically weird to build a beneficiation plant in the eastern parts of the country, 940 kilometers away from where our product originates from, in the Northern Cape. We have always been using that portion of the mining product the fines and the ultra-fines, which otherwise would have gone onto a tailings facility. Currently, about 20% to 30% of our sales goes into the battery space, and that makes us the largest supplier of manganese for the NCM, the nickel, cobalt, manganese, PCAM production outside of China. We have commenced construction of a 6,000-ton high-purity manganese monohydrate brownfield plant, and production will start very, very, very early in 2026. So what do we have? We have a 50-year-old brand that worldwide gets recognized as the brand for quality manganese, pure manganese. We truly understand the impact of ore variability on the hydrometallurgical processes. Well, obviously not me, I'm a miner, but I know people who understand it. So when I say we, I use it in the broadest possible way. We are a premium supplier in a world where our 2% gets matched by China's 98%. And our current process of dissolving our pure metal to make manganese sulfate sounds irrational, illogical, and yet it has got the lowest incentive price of any of the new non-Chinese high-purity manganese sulfate monohydrate suppliers or future suppliers. We make money at $2,500 per ton. You'll read the feasibility studies calling for $3,500, $4,500, and $5,000 a ton. Purity requirements for batteries. For battery-grade manganese, it's much higher than what you think. The devil is in the decimals. Nobody speaks bigger nonsense than the wannabes of the manganese space. You either make the specs, extremely tight specs, or you make a product that you have to dump into the animal feed market. There's no middle ground. Our metal dissolves comfortably into obviously what other people would fantasize to achieve, but we still have magnesium at 35 parts per million. We still have, or up to 80 parts per million. We still have iron at 15. Now, guys, do the sums. This is 99.9% pure manganese metal, except it doesn't make battery grade. So if you talk about 31.5% manganese and you call it battery grade, you just do not understand what battery grade means. If you don't look at the subcomponents, and these are the OEM specs, and obviously the OEMs are extremely conservative, demanding. Sometimes they don't quite know why they spec it, but these are the specs that we have to achieve if we want to play in the space. The technical expertise hurdle is high. I can arrogantly say that there's some emerging skills being developed on projects in Mintek and in Gwede and in all over the world. But current proven technical expertise outside of China, you'll have to come and visit us in Nelspruit to see. It is truly a China-dominated space. So if we talk about the understanding of the manganese chemistry for the flow sheet development, each ore body will have to have its own recipe. I don't think it's fully appreciated that what we do for the Northern Cape ore body is a fantastic solution for South Africa, but it doesn't apply just like that to Gabon or Gihani or Euromanganese's ore body. The amazing bottleneck that exists is the ability to detect and control the impurities. The analytical method development, I mean, there's just no third-party labs that can currently do that. Because what we are doing here is we are making, I mean, this is like making pharmaceuticals on an industrial scale. Good luck. You're going to have as many gray hairs I have if you pursue this for much longer. There's truly a lack of expertise and industrial know-how outside of China, understandably because China produces 98% of global electromanganese and 95% of global MSM. And then how to commission a large standalone plant in the West? So you have to build a mega plant. And then you have to commission it in small little bites at the rate at which the market is ready. And each one of your steps have to be permitted in terms of the OEM requirements. So this is the reality of current producers. Vibrance is doing 7,000 tons. We're doing 14,000 tons. Nippon's doing 1,000 tons. And China is doing a lot. Now, because of the hype of the battery market, obviously hundreds of new entrants are talking and raising money. And we wish them well. On the left is the current production of China. The dark pink or maroon is what they do. And the additional plant capacity they have announced. The middle bar is all of non-Chinese, of which we are quite a significant contributor in a small space, and our committed expansion project. And then the right-hand column is the sellers of hope, dreams, and raising money for lifestyle companies. They fill the world, and we'll see what comes of that. The manganese required for the lithium-ion batteries, we wish it would be high-purity manganese sulfate, but there are also other processes being developed that may use carbonates and other formulations. You can start with electromanganese. We've obviously developed and patented a process to go directly from manganese ore so that you cut out all the unnecessary steps in the middle. And then on the right-hand side are the different sort of battery formulations. Very difficult for a company of our size, impossible, very difficult for a country to take a firm view on what technology is going to be the winner. Very difficult. We do not know. We do not control where this will end, but it's not hard to be optimistic about the potential for manganese because of the attributes it brings to the battery. Capital allocation for battery-grade manganese. Manganese is abundantly available. We don't need new mines, despite what people tell you, especially not lower-grade mines that was previously left because they didn't make sense. Manganese goes into steel making. It's totally dependent on what happens in the world economy. In that little funny color blue is EMD, and then the golden color is the current consumption of electromanganese, and very small, almost invisible, 2% of the world's mining needs to go into high-purity manganese. Typical mining creates about 10% fines. So there's an abundance of fines which is unusable for the normal processes of making steel. If we look at the impact of batteries on the manganese supply chain, there was fantastic growth in the world through China. That leveled off, but the world manganese market is growing at a rate much faster than what can ever cause a shortage of manganese units for batteries. So, no new mines are needed for battery growth. Incremental capacity increases at existing mines is sufficient and much cheaper. The ore fines is already ideal. And so lumpy ore is required for the ferromanganese and silica manganese furnaces. They can't accept the fines, and so we will forever have access to a feedstock. So refining of ore into high purity manganese compounds will be the only viable projects. We should not think that because South Africa have a lot of manganese ore, we will automatically benefit. As a country, we need to be very wise in our capital allocation decisions. It's a very simple process. After 50 years, we know how to do it. We take somebody's waste, we chuck it around a bit, add a few chemicals, tons of electricity. It's madness. As you heard, electricity prices went up by 700%. And then we make the world's purest electromanganese, which fortunately we get a premium for, otherwise we would not exist. I want to take my last few seconds and talk about the South Africa's strategic advantage. And this is not meant to be cynical. I do think it's apart from the PGM space and iridium, it's the only place where we are actually well positioned. We are already the world's largest producer of manganese ore. MMC is already a refiner of high purity manganese metal, and now we are also following our product into the battery space. Manganese containing batteries, cell chemistry continues to be favored. Adding manganese brings down the cost and improves the capacity of batteries almost consistently. But South Africa needs to protect and grow local beneficiation and refining capacity in order to grow the battery market participation. Geopolitically, I don't particularly care which clown runs America. Or politician. Sorry, did I say clown? That was a slip of mind. We nearly had a politician, we got a clown. But as a small player in a big world, geopolitics is critically important. We must choose who we deal with as a country because it will feed directly into our ability to compete. I want to be obnoxiously in the face of everybody as I am. The minister's advisors are already here to walk me out. We fantasize about doing what other countries have done. Should we do what Indonesia have done? Indonesia legislated and forced themselves into being a significant player in nickel. Zimbabwe tried that in lithium. Yes, on the left-hand side, you can claim great success. Each one of those bars showed the level at which Indonesia played before they intervened and the level they played after they intervened. And therefore, there's a very commonly held view that it was fantastic for Indonesia. They now make stainless steel rather than just exporting raw material. They supply to China, and they may soon be making PCAM and CAM rather than just exporting nickel sulfate. A few points. South Africa is not dominant enough in manganese ore supply to have a net benefit. If we force manganese exporters not to export, it's not automatically going to convert into manganese beneficiation. The extent up, hopefully by young leaders of the future, currently by very, very old leaders, some cases. So I'm not here to beg. You guys don't have the money I need. But if we try and think, what is the ecosystem that is needed to grow South Africa's downstream manganese industry? We do need power supply. We cannot have an Eskom that gets 40% increases or even apply for that. We cannot stay in business in these types of businesses unless we've got secure and green and affordable electricity. We do need the institutional development support. This business was funded 50 years ago by the IDC. The next phase of taking on China and the world from a small privately owned business in Nelspruit will never happen unless we get the IDC support. We cannot pretend to do this without institutional support. Mintek universities, University of Limpopo, is doing fantastic work in collaboration with us. There are lots of pockets of excellence. And then obviously we also have to collaborate with the battery value chain. We should co-locate our future mega plant somewhere at Kuga with the nickel producers. It's not my call, but to me there's a logic to that. We should probably move some of these businesses back to the Northern Cape and go and make it where the mines are. I know you thought I would never conclude, but in conclusion, high purity manganese is a phenomenal battery material, and it is damn difficult to make. It's a lot more difficult than what you've been told, I promise you. Capital is needed to grow the refining expertise. As a country, we need to get serious about refining. We do mine a lot. We don't need to mine more. Of course, I'm not anti-mining, but that's not where our bottleneck is. We must not misallocate our scarce resources onto pet projects, well-promoted projects. We should really, as a country, be smart, box smart with our limited resources. And South Africa can benefit a lot more. We do have a natural endowment of vast manganese reserves, combined with local technical expertise to refine the ore up to the required purity levels. With appropriate government support and private sector collaboration, this manganese country can, after all, achieve what we all dream to achieve. Ladies, gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to the MMC story. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernard, for that insightful presentation. I think what is coming very loud and clear from the previous two presentations is that we do have technical challenges when it comes to either the separation of rare earth elements, refining, whether it's the production of high purity manganese. So what it says is that we can't do it alone. We need all the role players, we need industry, we need research and technology organizations, we need universities, we need all the role players, but most importantly, the role of government. We saw in the case of George, the US government come into the play, and talking to what Bernard is referring to, we need major investments and for us to really move a needle. And the next presentation also is about collaboration and partnership. I'm happy to announce that Penn State is a partner of Mintek. The expertise that are required are not within a single country. We see the theme emerging. It's all about the dominance of China. Dominance of China, whether it's production or capabilities or expertise. And we need to source this expertise. We need to collaborate. So on that note, I'd like to invite the next presenter, who will be talking about advancing sustainable extraction techniques for critical minerals, a focus on lithium recovery and silica amorphization in coal refuse. Somebody will be talking about coal. There's a role of coal going forward, and it's coming from the US. So I'll be listening very attentively on what the US has to say on coal. Just a joke aside. The next speaker is Tuluwala Se. He's a full-time PhD student in the John and Willie Leon Family Department of Energy and Minerals Engineering at Pennsylvania State University in the USA. He earned both his bachelor's and master's degree in mining engineering from the Federal University of Technology, Akure. Prior to starting his PhD, he worked as a graduate mining engineer at Dangote Cement, where he gained practical experience in mine, planning and unit operations. Tuluwalase, current research focus on repurposing coal refuse through sustainable lithium extraction and silica amorphization via high energy milling. He investigates the changes in crystallinity of coal refuse and underclay components under varying milling conditions using advanced characterization techniques, aiming to enhance lithium leaching kinetics and promote the use of coal refuse as a supplementary cementitious material. Penn State was also a funder of a pre-registration dinner last night. Thanks for that. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. So, like Dr. Molufuku has said, we need several partners from different aspects to collaborate on the issue of sustainable extraction of the critical minerals. That is an and now. So, my presentation will be away from the previous two speakers that's focused on the industry. I'll be talking more about the research and what I do at Penn State. So I'll be talking about the sustainable extraction of lithium from coal refuse using high energy milling. My name is Toluwalase Segun Ogusulade, and this project is being supervised by Dr. Olumide Ogumodimo. So in my presentation, I will start with the introduction and a problem statement, the advantage of mechanical activation, the objectives of my study and the methodology that was used, my results, my discussion, and my conclusion. So coal refuse generally are waste from coal mining and coal processing. They include rock, shale, underclay components, and under impurities. My emphasis here today will be on the underclay component of the coal refuse. And the common issues associated with coal refuse are acid mine drainage, air pollution, aesthetic eyesore, and the spontaneous coal combustion. Now, on the image on the far right, we see a surface salt sweeping from an active coal refuse, which could affect other downstream water bodies. And also, just directly below it, we have an enduring coal fire that has been on for over 50 years now in central Pennsylvania. This is just few of the many hazards that is caused by coal refuse disposal all over the world. A research study in the coal refuse, the underclay component especially, of central Pennsylvania, revealed that the coal refuse had a lithium content of up to 1,000 ppm, a silica content of 56.95%, and an alumina content of 34%. Now, because of the switch to a cleaner, greener energy, there's a high demand of lithium, and this has caused the price of lithium product to skyrocket. For instance, looking at the price of lithium hydroxide, it was about $4,000 per ton in 2020, but right now it's close to $1,000 per ton. This has made low conventional resource and secondary resource more economically viable to look into. And also, the lithium demand has been projected to increase more and more. And if we continue to supply lithium at the current rate, we will not be able to meet up the demand. And the gap between the demand and the supply can only be met if we look into low concentration resource and develop a better, more sustainable extraction method of lithium from the lithium-bearing clay minerals. So basically, I will talk about the summary and the drawbacks of the traditional lithium extraction method. So the traditional lithium extraction method always aim to achieve two purposes. Number one is to destroy the crystal lattice of the lithium-bearing clay mineral, and number two is to selectively extract the lithium from the clay mineral by ion exchange mechanism. But these methods have obvious disadvantage. For instance, the acidification method makes use of concentrated acid and is always a problem when you want to dispose it to the environment. It causes huge environmental impact. Other methods, including the roasting method, the calcination method, they all involve high temperature pretreatment, which requires a lot of energy. For instance, for you to be able to destroy the crystal lattice of muscovite, you have to heat up the muscovite to up to about 850 degrees Celsius and 1000 degrees Celsius for several hours before you are able to successfully destroy the crystal lattice. So challenges remain in developing a more environmentally friendly way of extracting lithium from lithium-bearing clay minerals. So this is a simple flow chart of how the current extraction method gets the lithium from the clay minerals. So the first thing they do is to calcine the clay. You calcine it or you roast it, which requires high temperature, and you treat the clay with acid and concentrated base chlorination, which also constitutes a huge environmental impact. So I want to replace the use of high temperature and the use of harsh chemicals with mechanical activation and mild lixiviants that are not considered dangerous to the environment to selectively extract lithium from the lithium-bearing clay minerals. So the objective of my study was to mechanically activate the underclay component of the core refuse at different milling time to characterize the activated samples in order to examine the changes in the crystalline phases, the surface morphology, and the particle size induced by mechanical activation. To clarify the effect of mechanical activation on the underclay component of core refuse, and lastly, to explore mechanical activation as a low-temperature alternative to extract lithium from lithium-bearing clay minerals. So this is my methodology. The first thing I do was to get my samples from Central Pennsylvania. Then I prepared the samples by crushing, then grinding the samples. I separated the samples into different size fractions, and I characterized the non-activated samples. Non-activated means that the samples that came, the natural samples, I characterized them to understand the chemical component of the sample, the present mineral phase in the sample. Then after characterizing them, I mechanically activated the sample. Then I also did characterization to observe the changes in the crystalline phase, the surface morphology, and also the particle size distribution. The characterization technique I used for the lithium content, I used ICP-AES. ICP-AES simply stands for inductively coupled plasma atomic emission spectroscopy. I used this because I was unable to detect the lithium content using the XRF. The XRF was able to give me a comprehensive chemical composition of the elements, but I couldn't get the lithium content with the XRF. I did the XRD to observe the mineral phase, the scanning electron microscopy to observe the surface morphology. Now, these are the mechanical activation parameters I used for each activation cycle. I used the mass of underclay was 35 grams. The size of my bore, they were of 30 sizes, 50 millimeter, 10 millimeter, and 5 millimeter. My bore to powder ratio was 20:1, and the milling speed was kept constant, 60 revolutions per minute. The only parameter that was varied was the milling time. I started from 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours. This slide is actually not showing it, but it's just directly beneath this. So this is the elemental composition of the clay components. This is a validation of what we have in literature review. Like I earlier stated, according to Razai et al., they got a silica content of up to 56.95%. When I did my XRF, I got a silica content of 54%, aluminum content of 26.5%, and I found the lithium content of different size fraction. Now, the reason I did it was to see if there was a preferential deportment of lithium in a particular size fraction. I wanted to observe that after grinding this at the preparation stage, was there any liberation of lithium? If there was liberation of lithium, then I might have a higher lithium content in a final size fraction. Now, from what we can see on the table on the right, there was no preferential deportment of lithium, meaning that I needed a more aggressive method of extracting my lithium from the underclay component. So after doing the XRD, we did a quantitative analysis, and the basic two minerals were kaolinite and muscovite, followed by quartz. We also did the surface morphology. What we observed was a plated structure, which is very typical of phyllosilicate minerals, of which kaolinite and muscovite are examples. This is just to confirm that the basic mineral phase that we have in the underclay component were kaolinite and muscovite. And we wondered how lithium could possibly get into kaolinite and muscovite crystal structure. There was an explanation to this. Muscovite normally has a diocta. It has a two-layered structure, the tetrahedra and the octahedra. So the octahedra normally is filled, the two vacant spaces are filled. It needs an extra metallic ion to fill the extra vacant space in order to complete the tri-octahedra street. So there's a possibility that lithium ion could come into the vacant octahedra space and possibly exchange with aluminium, which is 3+, and magnesium in order to balance the charge. So after doing this, I also got the result of the mechanical activation. And the result of the mechanical activation I got from this diffractometer. I realized that in my, I would have loved to explain this slide well, but I have some images below here which is not showing. Let me just use this. Okay, now in this XRD plot, this is the XRD of the non-activated samples. What I realized was that my major mineral components that was hosting the lithium, the kaolinite and the muscovite, they were concentrated on the left-hand side. And these are the different peaks that represent the different mineral phase in the underclay components. So if there was a way I could destroy this crystalline structure, I would have effectively liberated my lithium from the kaolinite and from the muscovite. So after activating the sample, for 30 minutes activation, there was a massive or a significant reduction in the peak of muscovite and kaolinite, as you can see from this green line that is showing. Number 2 represents the muscovite, while number 3 represents the kaolinite. Then after 1 hour, I realized that there was also a gradual disappearance of my kaolinite. At the 1 hour activation time, the only mineral phase that was present in the sample were quartz, anatase, and muscovite. The kaolinite and the cookite that hosted the lithium had been completely destroyed, although there was still an amount of lithium in the underclay component because the muscovite structure, a part of it was still intact. Then after activating for 2 hours, there was a complete disappearance of all the lithium-bearing clay minerals. I did an SEM to confirm this, and after doing the SEM, I realized that for the non-activated sample, we had a plated structure. There was a change in the surface morphology. After the 30 minutes activated time, the sharp edges of this plated structure transformed into a more rounded spherical cluster, which is an indication of amorphization. Amorphization is just simply the destruction of the crystalline phases that are present in the underclay samples. If the crystalline phases are destroyed, it implies that the lithium that is being hosted by the mineral phase is liberated. After doing the 1 hour activation, I realized that there was even a higher degree of amorphization. As you can see in the image on the right compared to the image on the left, the image on the right is kind of loose. You have a smoother surface texture compared to the image on the left, which shows that this sample is more amorphized than this sample. After doing this again, then 2 hours, we had agglomerates being formed. Then for the 4 hour activation, we added disintegration of the agglomerate that was formed. All this just points to one fact, that as we continue to activate the sample, there was a gradual destruction of the crystalline phase, and there was a gradual liberation of lithium hosted by the major minerals hosting the lithium. So the morphology insight, number 1 is that the disintegration of the mineral phase occurred in 2 phases. The first particle size destruction the formation of the amorphous aluminosilicate aggregate, and the second stage reduction of the agglomerate. And this was also confirmed by my particle size distribution. The particle size distribution, after 30 minutes, I had a D50 of close to about 10 microns. Now, because of the agglomeration at 1 hour activation time, there was an increase in the particle size. From the 10 micrometer I had for my D50, 50% of the particles passing, it increased to 20 micrometer. Even at the 2 hours, there was also a further increase in agglomeration coming together of the particle because of the destruction of the crystalline phase. Then at 4 hour activation, we realized that there was a disintegration of the agglomerate formed. It's now begun to reduce in size. So this is my conclusion, that my activation process affects the microstructure of the lithium-bearing clay mineral. My diffractogram decreases in intensity over the melee time, with the lithium-bearing clay mineral phase disappearing at 2 hours. Now, the transformation from the plating morphology to a spherical nanoclusters indicated that there was an alteration in the mineral phase. And this trend can only be attributed to the progressive amorphization of the underclay minerals. So, from what I did, the simple study I did, I concluded that there was a degree of disordering in the crystalline phases that was present in the underclay component, and we could entirely omit the need for thermal activation without requiring the use of high energy to maintain that temperature over a long duration. So my future work, I'm going to validate that the lithium has actually been liberated by doing some downstream hydrometallurgical leaching. I will evaluate the lithium extraction efficiency at different milling time. I will compare the lithium extraction efficiency with a conventional method and see which works well. I want to acknowledge the Materials Characterization Lab for the support and for the use of the different characterization technique that was used in this project. I give a special shout out to my supervisor, Dr. Olumide Ogumodimu, and the entire team of ASIDA at Penn State. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Toluwa Lase, for that presentation. By the way, he's not alone. He's accompanied by a huge team of professors, doctors from Penn State University as our partners, so welcome. I see them there at the back. The next presentation is from Herman. Herman is not new to most of us. He's a former Minteker, past and present. So Herman will be talking about critical minerals of the just energy transition and the future of mine closure. Herman is a specialist in the area of mine closure and mine rehabilitation with over 30 years of experience. Building on practical experience gained with over 30 mine rehabilitation projects in South Africa, he advises on mine closure to governments, funding agencies, and mining companies in South Africa, Argentina, Colombia, Georgia, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, and Egypt, amongst others. He's also deeply involved in environmental due diligence and ESG reporting across Africa for clients like VW, BMW, Barrick, Yankee Con, and Yildirim Group on mining projects in Madagascar, Ivory Coast, Namibia, Zimbabwe, and elsewhere. Herman, the stage is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity, Dr. Mutuku and the SIMM committee, for me to speak with you today. Before I start, I think it seems a bit strange to talk about mine closure as we stand at what is likely to be a boom cycle for critical raw minerals in South Africa. And you've heard from speakers this morning that indeed that cycle is how South Africa is very innovatively positioning itself to make the best use that we possibly can, and to think strategically about our position in the critical minerals market. But I suppose it's a question of asking a barber whether you need a haircut. And if you ask a person who's made a living around mine and rehabilitation and mine closure, then you'll hear something about a thought to the future and mine closure when we talk about critical minerals already. So with that, the agenda for my presentation, the content is really a quick look at the just energy transition and the demand for critical minerals. And as you've heard from Dr. Mutuku, the definition of critical minerals really depends on who you ask. And we'll look at CRM mining and sensitive areas in South Africa, then mine closure in South Africa specifically, and the risk of climate change, which I think we're ignoring at our peril. The future of mine closure and the impact of CRM mining then, and a few closing thoughts from that. Now, as DMT Kai Butler and as DMT, the bigger group, we've been involved with the critical raw minerals programs of the European Union for the past few years, and more recently within South Africa, the GIZ funding agency. And there are different perspectives on exactly what constitutes a critical raw mineral. Of course, various countries have a range of minerals which they can't supply internally, and they have their own ideas of what these supply constraints may be, but they're mostly political or logistic, or sometimes just other forms of supply constraints, of course. And the just energy transition, as you've heard from other speakers this afternoon already and later this morning, this demand is almost a balancing act between the need to transition and at the same time creating and causing some pollution and emissions while we're getting to a place where we can help ourselves as the wider human race with lower emissions, because it's important for our planet and our survival. And I'll circle back to climate change when we get there. But the just energy transition then requires a deliberate shift from fossil fuels to the new energy minerals. And as this transition is happening, technology and price drives innovation in this market currently at a very rapid pace. In as much as we are dependent on the PGM group minerals for electrolysis and catalysis in these new energy systems, they're very expensive. So as hard as we're working to try and mine them as efficiently as we can, other people are working as hard to try and reduce the dependency on them, just because of the expense. And I think that from a long-term perspective, you could make the argument that the current peaks and troughs in the markets are just normal market and technology replacement cycle on a fairly long time scale. That's certainly the result of some modeling that we've done in-house. And we could say that the developed economies, while manufacturing and innovation in the new energy technologies take place, have enormous, or where those activities take place, have enormous political and economic power to influence the markets. If you look at the countries that have defined CRMs, and here we're talking about China and Australia and the US, Canada has a critical minerals list, the EU, of course. There's a whole range of metals. I think there's 64 of them in total. But South Africa's position amongst this is really our strengths in chrome, manganese, and you've heard of some of them this morning. PGMs, of course, very much, and you could argue gold. And there are other CRMs that are significant in the global market, in which South Africa also has a stake: vanadium, cobalt, to a very small extent nickel and REEs, that you've heard some fine examples from this morning. And then South Africa has for itself defined coal as a critical strategic mineral for its own purposes and for our own reasons. So our approach has been data integration. When we start looking at where the mining expansion and where the boom was likely to happen, we started looking at sensitive areas. And of course, the mining will happen where the geology leads us and where it has led us over the last century in the country. But we use these CRM lists and where they are likely to occur in South Africa, and overlaid that with environmental sensitivity maps, most notably the Mine Water Atlas, and start looking at where we can expect these developments to occur, and then down the line where the closure is likely to be required. And it allowed us a degree of risk identification. We incorporated the CSIR's Green Book into this analysis, and looking where these mining developments will impact sensitive landscapes. And the high-risk zones are directly related to the existing mining activities. No surprises there. Taking the same analysis a step further, using a wider definition of critical raw minerals, we expanded the scope a little bit, and we looked at gold and other minerals, and also at various phases, not just mining, but exploration, and seeing where that's taking place. And again, not really any surprises. You shift the focus slightly and the emphasis to consider minerals that are indirectly related to the CRM extraction, but the findings remain consistent. Your core sensitive areas remain impacted despite that shift in focus. So in very short terms, the spatial analysis didn't lead us to any fundamental surprises. Looking down the line, though, that led us to a consideration of mine closure policy in South Africa, and we know that in 2021, the department published a draft national strategy on mine closure, and the question became of whether there's alignment here with what we see, in spatially at least, where we expect these impacts to occur. Of course, again, I think there were not any significant surprises there. The policy has the dual challenge of looking forward, trying to guide mine closure into the future, but also looking back, because the department has the responsibility to deal with abandoned mines. So it's not an easy equation to make, or an easy balance to strike. So despite the existing policies and the legislation, effective mine closure still remains unachieved for many of the mines in the country, and it seems that the practice of the industry has shifted to place these mines in almost perpetual care and maintenance. The policy, or the strategy at least, introduced the concept of regional mine closure, which introduces an additional layer of complexity to a system that already seems to struggle with achieving these closures in the areas where they're applied for. However, at the same time, while we're looking forward to where these impacts are going to be, how are we going to close these mines, what guidance is in place to close these mines, we find ourselves with a new source of information and the data, and a new view to the future, and that is the World Bank's climate change knowledge portal, which indicates how climate change will affect South Africa. The most directly measurable of those impacts is the changes in precipitation and the temperatures, but it indicates extreme weather events that we must be expecting, things like droughts, epidemics, extreme temperatures, and all these nasty aspects of climate change that we're going to have to deal with. How that translates to care and maintenance operations and to mine closure, of course, is we're talking about aspects of topsoil loss and increased erosion, vegetation die-offs where you've started to try and plant something and establish something, increased risks of TSF failures, if there are any, sedimentation and stream bed pollution. All of these things, if you're a mine trying to close, cost money, and none of it is good news. Just moving on in very briefly, and I'll wrap up, hopefully trying to get us back on track time-wise. In terms of supply and demand dynamics, South Africa's capacity to meet the global CRM demands over the next 2 decades remains untested. We don't know exactly to what extent industry will be able to ramp up, given the climate that we have and the limited investment potential that we have. But the projected demand far exceeds the supply, signaling a long-term boom until technology alternatives emerge. In terms of challenges and opportunity, climate change, we believe, will necessitate more resilient mine closure designs. And the global guidance around this mine closure has converged. If you look at guidance on mine closure from the ICMM, the World Bank, and a host of others, even the ISO standards now for mine closure and for abandoned mines, you find that there's a lot of convergence and agreement on what is the best way to approach it. And yet in South Africa, we still have somewhat of a challenge to achieve mine closure and to grant those mine closures. And at the same time, while those future mining developments align with those closure strategy focus areas spatially, the proposed strategy still has perhaps a few areas like climate change consideration and alignment with that international best practice that we could support and try and develop the strategy further. The regional closure adds a layer of complexity to an already deadlocked system in terms of mine closure. But that does bring us to my conclusion and a discussion of some of the opportunities that we have. We have opportunity to revitalize South Africa's mining sector. The responsible exploitation requires efficient mine closure and for long-term stability. In terms of the policy and the gaps, we know that the policy has the dual challenge of a forward and a backward view to address the abandoned mines. The mines that are currently in care and maintenance and find themselves perhaps at a deadlock really require this policy guidance to move forward. And I think there's a big argument for us in the industry around the department to also have to and want to understand the need to support the department in its efforts to develop that strategy and finally get it published. And there's an urgency to adapt these changes. As the global demand for CRMs drives the new wave of mining development, proper mine closure in South Africa lags behind. And there's a need for a forward-looking approach to mine closure, anticipating more extreme environmental conditions. So, with a few parting thoughts, and maybe just in the summary of the conclusion, we have very little control over the market drivers. We are looking at a boom cycle, with boom cycle opportunities and boom cycle risks. Looking into the future, mine closure is likely to become more difficult and more expensive. The thing that and to almost take a philosophical view on this, the thing that has saved us as a species in the past have been our ability to adapt, to innovate, and to cooperate. And you've certainly heard from other speakers about what we'll do in that regard. And we've made a point about supporting the DMRE in the development of this forward-looking mine closure strategy. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Over the years, focusing mainly on the pretreatment of phosphogypsum with the aim of increasing the leaching efficiency. So I think the CEO from Rainbow Rare Earth has done an amazing job in actually outlining the economic significance of rare earth elements and some of the progress that they have made in that particular progress. So I think it's also important to say I was actually part of that particular pilot plant that they ran at Mintek, and it's actually nice to see where they are currently. So rare earth elements play a major part in our daily lives. I think they are present in most technological devices that we have here today. So just to give a few examples of those ones. So for example, elements such as cerium in a form of cerium oxide, they are mainly used as catalyst support in cars, catalytical converters that help reduce carbon emissions. Elements such as neodymium, they use them to manufacture strong permanent magnets. Those are very important for wind turbines and also for aeroplanes. And then just to give last examples, elements such as europium and terbium, they are used mainly incorporated in cell phone and computer screens, and they're the reason why we currently like our iPhones, with those bright, vivid colors. So rare earth elements, basically, they are made up of scandium, yttrium, and lanthanide. So the lanthanides are further divided into various groups, which is the light REE, the medium, and the heavy REE. And this classification can be done using a variety of properties. So usually they do it using the atomic weights, so the light and then the heavy, and also in terms of economic significance. And I think as Bernard did mention earlier on, the major focus is on the heavy REEs, which are less scarce. So the economic value is actually in those particular rare earth elements. So over the past couple of years, interest has been on the rise, specifically with rare earth elements. However,
opportunities and areas of collaboration. Katlego Logodi, SABC News in Sandton. We see him deliver a keynote address just reflecting on the mining sector and how this sector has been doing over time. We know that this entity is an entity, Mintek, that falls under the Department of Minerals, and the minister just being here giving a keynote address in terms of also taking stock of how the country has been doing over time. We often hear that this country is endowed with these minerals, but do we see that just translating in terms of the economy and really what has been happening over time within that sector? I'm going to bring him into the conversation now. Minister Gwede Mantashe, who'll just reflect with us in terms of 90 years of Mintek, but also the programs that you've been working on with this entity to ensure that at least there's transformation and the sustainability of this sector. Welcome to the SABC, Minister. We see you delivering a keynote address. Let's reflect 90 years of Mintek. Let's talk about what has been happening over time where this entity is concerned.
No, Mintek has been critical in improving technology of the sector. But there was almost a bias towards gold at the time because gold mining was regarded as the in mining. Now they have shifted, now they've just released a study on the state of mining where they have done a study on 11 minerals, and they will do further 5 to make it 16. And they're doing a study on critical minerals. That shows that the focus is on the future, not on the history.
Let's reflect on that state of minerals in the country. And as I was saying, we often hear people saying that we are well endowed as a country right now in terms of the minerals. And over time, we've often heard people saying that South Africa and Africa on its own is really endowed with these minerals, but we've not been getting the most in terms of really what has been translating and moving into the economy. What is the state of the minerals of the country as we speak right now?
I don't know. Mining is the biggest foreign investment earner. It is exporting a lot of minerals. But what we are fighting for now is more value.
really also volatility in prices and low macroeconomics has caused some projects to delay. And it's not just lithium-ion battery. We heard from George from Rainbow this morning. Here's the electric motor, uses lots of copper coils and specifically those rare earth permanent magnet motors. The short story here is put rare earths in here, you can get rid of 30% of your battery. This is where your cost sits. But there's lots of other technologies in there. And so critical materials evolve, right? So I mentioned already LFP, this is lithium iron phosphate. So interestingly, I just moved back to South Africa. I was working in London for a research firm called Roskill, and they were looking at the lithium-ion battery forecast in sort of 2017, 18. And I came back to South Africa, smack in the middle of load shedding, which has been brought up as well. And I all of a sudden started seeing lithium-ion batteries on Take-A-Lot, thinking that they're expensive. And I thought, they're still expensive. But becoming more and more affordable rather than having 2 car batteries there to charge your Wi-Fi router. And I then looked at it and I said LFP, and I asked my analysts, have you seen this LFP? And I said, no, it's a very new technology. I was like, well, it's in South Africa. So in some form of way, South Africa has actually been ahead of the energy storage side of things in terms of integrating this into our grid storage. But the point is that when LFP came out, it was a lower cost battery, wasn't the same energy density, so it's suitable quite well for using home applications, and lower cost. And when we go back to that point in time, we probably had about 5 or maybe 7 different lithium-ion formulations in our forecasts. Now we have probably close to 30, depending on how crazy you get. Manganese, we've got MMC here, who we work closely with. Looking at exposure to the lithium, the nickel, manganese, cobalt, but also these LFP, you can see LMFP, so they're adding manganese in here to improve the energy density. So you're seeing all these technologies enable energy transition, right? So it's the enabling that's important. So it's very difficult to substitute that, especially when there is a government or an incentive drive about net zero transmissions. There are regional differences. So understanding what the critical materials are is just part one. What are the interesting materials? But understanding where the growth is. If you look at LFP markets, we forecast those to be much larger in China than in Europe and US. The rest of world market will mimic that of China a lot more because we expect China to be able to export and capture most of that market growth. These 2 markets are still reliant on using Chinese raw materials. But the EU and US have now invested quite a lot of capital to build out gigafactories, so lithium-ion battery facilities, to target these electric vehicles that they want to put onto the roads. And so even though there is a low-cost option, they've kind of missed some of that gap. We do expect that to ramp up, but there's also IP restrictions here, which might see that slow down based on these forecasts. So geopolitical relationships become quite complex in the scenario. So understanding where your markets are is quite important here, right? Where do you invest, what supply chain? And we'll come back to that shortly. The other part of this narrative is we are seeing our downstream end users, BMW, VW, and the rest of them, all of which have quite important stakes in South African economy, not in the EV space just yet. They are all starting to try and understand their upstream supply chain. Right? Why? Because this term criticality, ethical sourcing is part of it. You think about cobalt and the thrifting out of that, concerns about material coming out of the DRC, but there's been a lot of drive to improve that material supply chain. But on the flip side of the nickel story you heard earlier was that came with byproduct. Cobalt has absolutely flooded the market. Cobalt's at historical low prices. So it's been thrifted out of technologies and has now come along as a byproduct supply chain. So these guys are really trying to understand where is this material. These are fast-growing markets. They're being told they need to produce X electric vehicles or they have to pay a carbon tax. And this is already in the 2030s. So, and this calculates out to billions of dollars. You can see some of the names here. The Chinese are really investing quite heavily. And over here, just for fun, I'd be happy to show you more of this. This is some lithium analysis we do. It's a forecasting cost curve. So we've got lots of different projects in here. George, we're happy to put yours into our rare earths analysis when you're ready. And to try and understand where we are. Prices are sitting around about here. And so the question is why Why are prices down here when you've got all these projects requiring up here? And that's the
All right. It's all about the future sustainability of the country's mineral sector, as we see Minister Gwede